Good day, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, NIL and Athlete Health and Safety, the current climate for collegiate athletics, presented by the Athletics Healthcare Administrator Association and the U.S. Council for Athletes' Health. My name is Dr. Jim Borchers. I'm the president and co-founder of the U.S. Council for Athletes' Health, and very happy to be here today with our distinguished guest. We appreciate the great turnout for today's presentation. We know you're going to find this information valuable. We know today's topic around name, image, and likeness for collegiate athletes is one of the most debated and discussed topics in all of sports and the landscape. And today's panelists, we know, will be able to provide us with a great deal of information, not around only name, image, and likeness for collegiate athletics and how it will shape athletics, but the impact it may have on collegiate athlete health, safety, and wellness, and things that we should be thinking about in that area as well. Just a few key housekeeping items before we dive into today's discussion. We're asking everyone that's not a panelist, please keep your volume setting on mute to reduce background noise. We do have a Q&A available in our Zoom platform. I'm sure many of you are familiar with. We ask you to post questions there. We know that because of our time limitations today, we may not get to questions, but be assured that a representative from the U.S. Council for Athletes' Health or the Athletic Healthcare Administration will reach out with an answer to your question if we don't get to that today. We do have certificates for athletic training, continuing education will be sent to all attendees via email after the course. And the course evaluation is hosted by Zoom, and a link will also be sent via email. But please remember, you need to complete those to claim your CEUs. Without any further hesitation, I really want to introduce our panelists today, because we're really very, very fortunate to have such a great panel here to discuss this really important topic with us. Our first panelist is Congressman Anthony Gonzalez, from a member of the U.S. House of Representatives from the state of Ohio. Congressman Gonzalez is a former athlete, collegiate football player and professional football player, and has served in the U.S. House for Ohio's 16th Congressional District since 2019, and has been very active in this issue of name, image, and likeness and health and safety for collegiate athletes. We're also very happy today to be joined by Pat Chun, who is the current athletic director at Washington State University. Pat has a long history in collegiate athletics, where he's served on numerous national committees around issues that affect collegiate athletics and associations at the national level, including a number of executive committees in NACDA, and continues to provide leadership within collegiate athletics, and has been a staunch supporter of athletes throughout his career around name, image, and likeness, but also around health, safety, and wellness. And our last panelist today, we're very happy to introduce, is Matthew Mitten, who is a professor of law at Marquette University Law School and the executive director of the National Sports Law Institute at Marquette University Law School in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Professor Mitten also has a great deal of experience with the NCAA, being a former member and chair of the Competitive Safeguards Committee, amongst other significant positions that he's held throughout athletics. So, gentlemen, thank you for joining us today. Looking forward to this discussion. I thought maybe Congressman Gonzalez, we would start with you, because I think that it would be really important for our participants to understand at a national level and a federal level the importance of name, image, and likeness, and some of the issues that you've been dealing with, and maybe framing for us name, image, and likeness and the issues around collegiate athletics.
Sure. Well, first off, thanks for having me. Always great to be with you all, and great to see some old friends here. So name, image, and likeness, as Dr. Borchers mentioned, something that I've been thinking about really since I played at Ohio State back in the early 2000s. And, the impetus behind taking it up at a congressional level was the fact that all these states had started to come forward with their own name, image, and likeness laws, California being the first. But then obviously we have a handful of others that well, actually a lot of others that have been passed, soon to be coming into law. And so it became pretty obvious to me that the first thing we needed to do was just have one national standard. I think the idea that you could have 50 different states with 50 different laws governing the NIL space, I think is frankly a disaster for college athletics, and very difficult for individuals. The last thing on earth you want as an athlete or as a student athlete is to feel like you have to look at the state houses around the country to figure out which state is going to implement the law that you like the best, as you sort of figure out how to go through the college selection process. So that's one component, but then the other side of it obviously is a fairness component, to make sure that everybody's playing by the same rules, and that the system itself, the college system itself, maintains the integrity that is required to have competitive balance, to the extent that happens. And so our goals with the bill that we've put forward, now for the second Congress in a row, a bipartisan bill, is to basically do that, to have one national standard, and to put in enough safeguards to protect the recruitment space, but also to enforce some of that competitive balance. And so that general concept, just those two components, having a national standard, and having guardrails around recruitment, I would say it took me about 12 months to get people to agree to that. I think we've largely agreed on that as a Congress, both in the Senate and the House. Where the debate is now is sort of what, in addition to NIL, should we tackle. My personal view is, with this specific piece of legislation, we should stay on NIL, because it's the only thing we all agree on. And the truth is, the clock is ticking, and come July, I believe there's 3 states, there might be more, but I believe there's 3 states that are going to have laws come on the books. And so we actually need to provide that clarity, and we need to provide it quickly. Where the debate has moved is, should we include things like healthcare? Should we tackle the transfer issues? Should we do anything around freedom of movement for players? And when they can turn pro versus not, and what rights they have there. These are all interesting questions. They're important questions. I don't believe that Congress will find a way to agree on them, at least not in the next couple months. And so that's why my push has been, let's stick on NIL, and let's talk about the other issues concurrently, but knowing that we're probably not going to agree to all of them, on any sort of short timeline. And where does legislation sit now? Well, now the game is primarily in the Senate. I'm a House member, but the game is primarily in the Senate. They've taken it up in a serious way. They've had multiple hearings. They had one last week, I believe, or maybe 2 weeks ago. And that's sort of where they're at. My sense is they will pass something. It'll come over to the House, and then we might make a few tweaks, and then hopefully get something signed into law. And the last thing I'll say on the healthcare bit, because I know it's important to this group, and me as a former athlete. That debate is primarily around sort of how much healthcare, and what are the healthcare rights that an individual would have, that a student athlete would have. Those are tough questions. Those are tough questions to answer for any segment of the population, whether we're talking about seniors or young families. Any sector of the population, healthcare questions and healthcare policy is very, very difficult. And I think you all sort of realize that if you're following American politics. And so, what I'm trying to push for, if we're going to go in that route, is let's do some things that aren't going to put a ton of additional cost onto the athletic department budgets, which would result, in my opinion, in cutting a lot of sports, which I think would be wrong. I want as many people to have the student athlete experience as possible. But also, realizing that we can do better by the student athletes, and there are ways that we can improve the healthcare experience, whether that's through second opinions, or some other mechanism, or best practices that are implemented and have real teeth behind them to make sure that student athletes are getting the right amount of care that they need, because we all play violent sports, sports that have a high degree of injury. And we want to make sure we're doing right by that. And I know everybody on this call feels the same way. So that's sort of where I'm trying to focus the conversation if it comes down to healthcare. But again, my belief is the thing we should do is just agree on what we can agree on and move forward. And so with that, I'll turn it back. And thanks again for having me.
Thanks so much, Congressman. Great comments there. And I think, Matt, if we could turn to you, because I know you had the privilege of testifying at the most recent Senate hearing just last week and in some of our discussions. Maybe just following up on the Congressman's comments on NIL, where it sits, and your comments on the impact for collegiate athletics, but certainly the timeliness as well. So thank you again for joining us, and appreciate your comments.
Yeah, well, thank you very much, Dr. Borchers. It's a honor and a pleasure to join you today, and particularly with, I'm a Buckeye, also graduated back in 1981 with a BA in economics. So a pleasure to be on a panel with two others, as well as Athletic Director Chun. Yeah, last week is actually the second time within a year that I have testified before a Senate committee, Judiciary, I think July of last year, and Commerce just last week. And it does appear that now there is consensus that there needs to be one uniform NIL rights law for all intercollegiate athletes nationwide. Just a little background that I can provide, being a former intellectual property lawyer. Name, image, and likeness rights, or they're sometimes known as the right of publicity, are created by state law. So there's roughly 35 states that have recognized those, either by common law, judge-created law, or by statute. And everybody has them. It's not just celebrities and athletes. And the reason that the various states are jumping in is they don't want to put their colleges and universities within their home state at a competitive disadvantage. So I think now there's 7 states. Texas just, the governor signed its statute yesterday. There's 7 states whose laws are going to go into effect July 1st. And it's going to be absolutely chaos. The NCAA, this all started back in April of 2020, where the Board of Governors directed each of the 3 divisions, 1, 2, and 3, to develop their own NIL legislation. And I think that arose out of something. Gene Smith was one of the co-chairs, Ohio State's athletic director, put together a proposal. The NCAA is understandably, kind of reluctant to do it, although President Emmert said last week that they're going to do it. They're going to get something done by July 1, because it's going to be virtually impossible to comply with all these different state laws. There's been, I think, 19 states that have enacted them. There'll be others going forward. So I agree entirely with Representative Gonzalez. Needs to be a uniform rule. The question then becomes, all right, what ought to be the components of it? How restrictive is this going to be? Everyone agrees that student athletes should be able to get, fair market value for licensing their name, image, and likeness. And they're going to be able to hire agents and business people to help them do that. But there's got to be some guardrails or rules that maintain the integrity, of college sports competition, its distinction from professional sports, and to make sure that this isn't used by colleges and universities to kind of indirectly get recruiting advantages. Unfortunately, we know that's likely to happen. So the key thing, I think, to understand with NIL rights, this would be money that student athletes are going to get from third parties, not the university itself. So the university is going to need to provide some education to student athletes. They're going to have to realize, for example, there's rules that you have to comply with, and you're going to have to pay taxes on this, federal, state, and local. The athletic scholarship is not. So that's going to be a big change, and make sure that you're getting reputable people who aren't, cheating or defrauding student athletes and these sorts of things. So it's quite important. And I agree entirely, again, with Representative Gonzalez. All the other issues, which are quite important, particularly student athlete healthcare and safety, those, the pot isn't boiling as much on those. I mean, it really is for NIL, which goes into effect in a couple weeks. So thank you.